either people are so stupid out there, illiterate, or they are just overraged that they just ignore some simple facts.
Yeah, I think the general rule, though, both through the Bible and psychology, is that it's hard not to become way stupider when you're in a crowd.
Or any Muslim country, there's no problem. But to say that Islam is the core problem, I think that is not true. And Islam will take over United States and Islam will take over UK is also a very, very big fallacy. Let me tell you how.
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Christ and Caliphate. On this podcast, we discuss current things happening in the Muslim world and the Middle East, and we talk about the underpinning worldview ideas behind those things. Today, we're going to be covering our podcast's favorite congressional hopeful going and making a very fiery speech in England. And we are going to be having some general discussions around Islamophobia prompted by comments of the mayor of Dearborn to a Christian preacher in a city council meeting. Ibars is away today, so the conversation will look a little different with just the two of us, but I think we should still have fun. So let's jump straight into the speech from Valentina Gomez here. So since the last time we covered her, she also burned a Qur'an.
Yeah.
We didn't comment on that specifically, but we have done several episodes on Qur'an burning in the past that you can look up if you want to hear what we have to say about that. But here is Valentina's speech.
England belongs to the English. It's either now or never. Because if these rapist Muslims take over, they will not only rape your women, they will behead your sons, just like they did on October 7th in Israel. So we either fight now or we die. And we're fighters. We are warriors of Jesus Christ. And in the words of the great Charlie Kirk, Islam is the sword that the left is using to destroy Christian nations and to destroy every Christian nation across the world. So do not make peace with evil. Destroy it. And we need a new prime minister that has guts and that's going to stand up for the British and send all of these rapist Muslims and dirty rugs back to their Sharia nations. And after what they did to Charlie Kirk, debate time is over. So I will get to the United States Congress and we will finish what Charlie Kirk started. So help me God.
I mean, there are lots of fallacies in there, straight away blunt fallacies, and like people are cheering on that. I don't know, either people are so stupid out there, illiterate, or they are just overraged that they just ignore some simple facts.
Yeah, I think the general rule, though, both through the Bible and psychology, is that it's hard not to become way stupider when you're in a crowd.
Yeah.
Crowds are dumb. Crowds go along with things. The group psychology is really powerful. And probably a lot of those people cheering, if you got them one-on-one, would probably be more reasonable. But then suddenly you get everybody in a big group and suddenly the crazy takes over.
Right.
Because that crazy is in everybody.
Yes. Inherent evil. That's part of it. But what I can sense from that, if it was for Selena Gomez or Martina Gomez, she would have thought Selena, Valentina, whatever, not so important. But to say
Racist.
I mean, the way she's reaching, I'm not against one particular group or people. If it was for her, she would have started crusades next day.
Uh-huh.
It was that type of mentality. We should drive them back from where they come from. I mean, okay, thank you very much for saying that these are the countries where they value freedom, and you point your fingers at, I would say, developing countries. I'm not using the word third world countries, and say because they do not have freedom, that's why they have problems. So here you're drawing an equal, saying we're going to do the same as they are doing, but still we will be the holders of the flags of freedom and the free speech. So I think there is, number one, that's a very big contradiction. Number two, as far as I know, Christianity is a welcoming religion. It is not pushing religion. It is not saying that Muslims are not allowed here. Yes, of course, there are rules, there are standards, there are laws that need to be followed. But just to say that you are Muslim, that's why you are not allowed in a Christian country or where there are majority of Christians, I think it is fundamentally, as far as my knowledge is concerned, I am very not so knowledgeable in that. You can, of course, highlight more on that, but I think it's against the very basic principle of Christianity.
Yeah, so she describes herself as a warrior of Jesus Christ, and one of the most important commandments in the Ten Commandments is, "You shall not take the Lord's name in vain." And if you look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was in a society where they also wanted to kick out the foreigners. Now, though, both with the Romans, the actual occupiers, but also the Samaritans too. They didn't like the Samaritans either. And Jesus never went along with that kind of mindset, because the problem the Jews at the time of Jesus had was not the Samaritans, and it was not the Romans fundamentally. It was their own souls and their own character and their own problems. And Jesus taught that we don't solve our own problems by looking at external sources. We solve our problems by first and foremost looking at within. The Bible says in another place that judgment starts with the household of God.
Right.
Meaning, doing the right thing, God's judgment, God's dealing with people, starts with those who know him and then cascades outwards. And England looking to blame Muslims for England's problems is foolish. Churches in England are not closing because Dawa guys have been converting everybody and turning them into mosques. Churches are getting turned into mosques because Christianity abandoned itself to Enlightenment thinking and moved beyond biblical ideas, the core principles, and they faded away. And Muslims moved into empty buildings. So the problem isn't so much that Muslims moved in, although it may be God's judgment on British Christians that happened. The problem is those churches were empty in the first place.
Yes. And I think, going back to Miss Gomez, I mix up her name again and again. But going back to her, I think, when you use such a rhetoric, it is, I mean, one equivalence I can draw is you meet any Afghani, right? You ask why Afghanistan failed. First answer is because of ISI. I mean, how realistic it is, right? And it's like ISI can be one person responsible, but captain of the ship is responsible for the ship. So Titanic sank, responsibility goes to the captain, not the crew member who was watching over. I mean, yeah, you can say 10% of his fault, but eventually it comes down to the captain itself.
Right.
So the people who are running the country are responsible for decline or applying of the country. So, and saying that Muslims are the problem, yes, some of the Muslims are problematic. Nobody is denying them. And those type of people exist in every single religion, every single society. I can give you countless examples from India where conservative, I won't use conservative, I would say radical Hindus are forcing Muslim to say certain, chant certain of their things that are against very basic principles of Islam. So is some Christians, for example, Miss Gomez burned Quran, which is against the very principles of humanity. You are doing certain things. For example, I know it's not equal to say that one burning Bible versus one burning Quran, but since there is a strong affiliation of Muslims with that religious text, right, we have to be considerate of our actions, right? So we always propagate from this platform that there should be harmony, there should be peace, there should be coexistence in terms of you believe whatever you believe, I leave me alone type of mentality. And that's the very fundamental principles of this very country. Going back to Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and all the forefathers, they set the foundation of this country on very principle that you're free to come in this country without being fear of practicing whatever you are practicing.
So the problem with what Valentina Gomez is doing to Muslims, it's taking the worst streams of Islamic thought and the most brutal implementation of those streams of thought and then projecting it onto everybody, and that helps nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially, in order to do what she wants done, is you have to take people and send them to different countries. And some of those people, a lot of those people, aren't even foreign born, right? They are British citizens by law. And if you suddenly say, okay, well, anybody who is Muslim cannot be a British citizen, if you do that, how long until that same legal framework is applied to you? It is very dangerous and it's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's much better for us to be able to fight bad ideas with good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody is a criminal, by all means, prosecute for them for the crime.
Right.
But in Western law, which is downstream from English common law, which is downstream from the Book of Deuteronomy through Alfred the Great, somebody is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Right? You do not punish a son for the sins of his father. So you cannot punish a Muslim for the sins of Islam, right? You cannot punish one Muslim for the sins of other Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to be treated like an individual. And if you want to make more robust legal frameworks to deal with crimes that exist or breaches of British law that happen within the Muslim community in England, sure, you can and should pursue those things, but not by painting people with a broad brush.
Yeah, I think one other aspect related to Gomez is that similar of her liking exist in those Muslim world where they advocate for pure Islamism and say all these Christians should be driven out, all these non-Muslims should be driven out of our countries because these people are corrupting our nation. It's the same rhetoric, but in a different balance, right? And I've been opposing that for a very, very long time. And I say, no, we should live in a world where I accept a person's different belief. Again, with the notion, a lot of people get confused in that you are propagating a very liberal, open society where everyone can do whatever they want. No, I'm not advocating that. All I'm saying is that your beliefs are your beliefs, my beliefs are my beliefs, and let's just coexist with having friendly conversations and openness. You come to me, you talk about Christianity, and if I found appealing, then I should have the right to change my religion and be Christian without fear of being persecuted, as that's happening in Muslim world, right? Likewise, if a Christian wants to convert to Islam, then it is completely within his rights to do so.
Right. Ultimately, this between him and God.
God,
right?
yes.
So
yes, he's doing wrong. Say
right.
From
So if Allah will send someone to hell for leaving Islam, or conversely, if somebody abandons the faith and is judged by God eternally, that is ultimately God's business.
Yes.
Right. And you kick that person out of the mosque, sure. Kick that person out of the church, absolutely. But you need God himself is going to deal with ultimate punishment and consequences of those things, that should be out of our hands.
Right. So if to wrap up, Celine, so again I'm saying Miss Gomez, let's put it this way. What's your thought, or what's your opinion and also advice?
So my opinion is that people like Valentina Gomez are tapping into something that is an unresolved problem. The cultural and political class in the West has not done a good job of understanding Islam, and it tends to fluctuate between two extremes. The one extreme is that all Muslims are terrorists, and the other is this inability to see any link between Islam and violence. And if we want to be able to properly solve problems in Muslim communities in the West and in the Muslim world itself, we actually have to be able to look at these things honestly outside of neat and tidy rhetorical political frameworks. We have to be able to understand these things ourselves. So as Christians, we are told time and time again, or actually maybe just in one place, but the principle is eternal. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers in the heavenly places. So as Christians, if we have disagreements with Islam, which we do, then we need to fight that not by means of persecuting human beings or using power to control people, but by thinking, by arguing, by persuading. And that is the way that the West can be saved. And the West, our society, Christianity, is not about some sort of ethnic cultural purity. The early church has Jews, Greeks, Romans, Scythians, Arabs. It has everybody inside of it, as you see in Acts chapter 2. And English history itself is the same. At one point, Roman Christian England was being invaded by pagan Saxons who did not believe in Christianity, who were in danger of wiping out the Christian way of life in England. And they took over, and then they all became Christians. Then Christian Saxon England, a few hundred years later, was in danger from pagan Vikings invading and destroying Christian England once more. And they got a long way. They took over a lot of England. But eventually, Alfred the Great ran away, regrouped, rebuilt his army, and defeated the Vikings, defeated Guthrum. And he did not deport all the Vikings. He made a treaty where he allowed them to settle and become part of England and become part of the culture. And all those Vikings eventually became Christians and part of our heritage. My last name comes from a Norman word because that's part of the history of England. So as Christians, it's futility to think of some sort of mythical ethnic past that we can go back to. But what we can do is point ourselves back to God's standards, and we can have hope that anybody can be a part of God's family. That is in the Bible, it's in British history. And if we embrace that, if we hold the line ideologically, but extend open arms to all kinds of people, then we can flourish like we never have before. So now we're going to be talking about the concept of Islamophobia. And the easiest jumping off point for this is something that's been in the news like today, where there was a street in Dearborn, Michigan, which is being named after a guy called Osama, who is a sort of virulent defender of Hamas and Hezbollah, and and sort of wrote things about jihad. That it's our duty to resist with every blade of grass. Those who could write should write. Those who should fight should fight. We should fight with swords and fists and rockets and everything we can, right? And so Dearborn, Michigan is in the process of naming a street after this guy. And in a city council meeting, this preacher is trying to address this and saying this is not the appropriate type of person to name a street after, because we should be for peace. And he doesn't he's not rude about it. He says, I've lived in Lebanon, I've lived in Israel, and I've lived in Palestine, and I just want to see peace between, all people. And this is kind of how the conversation goes.
I mean, Hezbollah, bombed the embassy in Beirut, and including many Americans. So I just feel that's quite inappropriate.
You are an Islamophobe, and although you live here, I want you to know, as mayor, you are not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city, because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. You are cutting fire with fire. I think going back to the terminology Islamophobia, it exists, and it exists more than anti-Semitism from a lens of me and from lens of many other of my liking. Again, one can argue, are you saying in the United States or saying worldwide? I would say, if not much of a big difference, they go side by side. Where there is Islamophobia, there is anti-Semitism too. So I think wherever this type of religious rhetoric, hate against one particular group of people, number one, is condemnable. If for Muslims, I would say, then when they say that all Jews are bad, that is a wrong rhetoric, right? Yes, you can criticize, like I do, the state's policies, that is state of Israel, because Israel itself, a state, is not with religion. It's people who make certain policies. So yes, I can disagree with that. And so you can also disagree with the policies of Afghanistan or Pakistan or any Muslim country. There's no problem. But to say that Islam is the core problem, I think that is not true. And Islam will take over United States, and Islam will take over UK is also a very, very big fallacy. Let me tell you how. Right now, the percentage of Muslim in the United States is 1.34 to be more precise, or maybe somewhere around it. Let's say 1.5% of total population of the United States are Muslims. So in order to them to take over, of course, in 1.5, we are talking a very small number that are radical, who believe in the theory of taking over, right? Which drops the number to less than 0.5%, right? So 0.5%, how are they going to take over United States? That's my open-ended question. You may come up with, they will produce babies on an enormous amount. Well, that will also take hundreds of years, if not thousand, to be able to outnumber other religions in here. That's point number one. Number two, you say they bring force. I think United States military powers and its capability to defend itself from internal and external enemies is strong enough that 2% can never, or at least 10% of population cannot take over the whole country and subdue you under their rule and their law. So that two things I would like to address to begin with that exist out there, and people propagate that a lot and make their cases, just like Valentina Gomez did, that Muslims will take over. And I see a lot of Fox News comments on that particular thing. So I think, this is just a phobia that exists in people's mind. I think there is reality. I'm not denying that there is not reality, but that reality is so minute, and you're using a big zoom on that and saying this is going to happen.
So my input on this is, anybody who thinks Islam is in an imminent threat of taking over the West has clearly never been to an event that's organized by Muslims.
You're bringing a humor side to it. Yes, I like it. Okay.
But there's even that guy in Pakistan who was, I forgot his name, but he was a Muslim sheikh who was saying, people keep talking about reestablishing the caliphate. Why do we want a caliphate? We can't even run a madrasa.
Right. It's like, yes, that's the funny side.
So here's what I would say. I really don't like the term Islamophobia. I would way rather, because it's simultaneously describing something that's real and not real at the same time. I would way rather Islamophobia be replaced with the term Muslimophobia.
Or say anti-Islamism.
Not even that, because so here's what I'm saying. I have been called an Islamophobe before because of the content of this podcast.
Yeah.
So Muslim activists and left-wing activists, but activists in general, will use the term Islamophobia to beat people over the head who want to make some sort of criticism or disagreement with Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's easy to entitle people,
yeah, right.
rather than have a legitimate argument with them.
Yes, exactly. And that's happened to me like several times. And I'm not scared of Islam at all, right?
Yeah.
I'm not scared of Muslims at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm less scared
I'm
of
witness to that.
Yeah, I'm less scared of Muslims than other Muslims are.
Right. that is also true. You know,
They're more scared of each other than I'm scared of them. No, so, but there are people, as we've both experienced, who have an irrational fear of Muslims.
Yes.
Right. So anti-Islamism or Islamophobia, it's too catch-all for me. And people need to have a differentiation between criticism and disagreement with Islam to a fear of Muslims or even bad treatment of Muslims.
Yeah, I mean, like, to draw the parallel, right? Why there is so much anti-Semitism in Muslim world?
Well, that's complicated, but part of it is a lot of it's a failure to differentiate.
I think it's more of a fear that with the help of West, the small country will eventually take over our lands.
Mm-hmm.
You see the parallel I'm drawing here? That same fear that exists in here. And like Muslims will take over. It's like the Greater Israel plan. We already talked about it, how much real it is and how much not real it is. But in Muslims' mind over there, that these group of people will eventually drive us out of our lands and our homes, and they will take over. And what we need to do is fight. That's the inherent kind of like response, because there is unfortunately lack of education, lack of awareness, and lack of right information, or the foot has not been set right for them. So in their mind is either you're my enemy or you're my friend. It just, there's no other way. You know, there is no such thing as negotiation or talks or seeing a way out. It's rather you coming to kill me. Before you kill me, I'll kill you. So that is the mindset driving there. If you use that same mindset, I think then you should not hold the flag of that championship of freedom. You should not hold the free speech, all those things that West has been advocating for so long. So my argument again will stand on this particular notion that as there exists anti-Semitism, there exists Islamophobia, and that Islamophobia or anti-Islamism is a big deal. At least, before coming to United States, I thought it's just a Muslim way of not engaging in a conversation that can lead to a conclusion. Right? That was my mindset.
And it is that at times.
Yes.
It's not just that.
Yeah. But when I came here, as being involved in like I have connections in South and so on and so forth. So I have seen that to a big extent that there is a growing Muslim hate just because they're Muslim, right? That is alarming, and that will eventually deteriorate your societies.
So when I was starting the Al-Maida initiative, I met with one guy who was interested in donating to what we do. And everything we do is above board, so we're a 501c3, and there's like a proper paper trail. So almost all donations happen like electronically. But this guy like literally handed me a wad of cash under the table, and I was like, I can't really take this kind of donation. It's better to do it electronically. And he says, no way, I don't want those people finding out where I live. Those people being Muslims, right? It's just right? As if Muslims are watching our donors and trying to like keep a database, right? That is a phobia, right? That is
That is a phobia to like extreme level phobia.
that is that's a phobia, and there are people with irrational fears of Islam, right? So now, if you are a like Byzantine peasant in the year 700 and the Muslim armies are coming through, like, threatening to kind of enslave you and take your city, you have every legitimate reason to be fed of Islam and Muslims at that point, right?
Yeah.
But in the time and place we're in now, there's a rational critique of Islam, but for the most part, there's not a rational fear of the average Muslim, right? Should there be some wariness about people who are sort of ISIS, Al Qaeda aligned? Sure, but you cannot project that onto everybody because it's not everybody, and you have to be able to differentiate properly and to be able to make distinction between who is actually actively trying to take over and who is not.
Yeah, I mean, again, coming from Muslim world, one thing I would say that the magnifying lens is used most of the time. As I mentioned before, that people see like only very, very limited amount of people or numbers or percentage, I would say. Then I would not use, I'll take my words back as limited amount of people. No, limited amount of percentage. They have crazy mindset, some interpretation of Islam that is, I'm not saying that there are no references in Islam about which leads to that path. Yes, it does. But there are many other interpretations of that. And so I think what it is doing, this Islamophobia is doing two things to the West, or the Muslims who are in the West, right? So number one is that they are seeing themselves as people who are isolated, even though if they try to assimilate and be part of that culture, right? Follow the rules, follow the law of the land, and do your own business, right? When these people see this unnamed hate or hatred just because of their identity, that kind of like pushes you to a corner and say, no matter what I do, I'll never be part of this society. So why I should not associate with the people that are more of my liking, or people that are of my community, society, religion. That is effect number one.
Exactly. So I'd make the argument, if you really, really, really want to defeat Islam as an ideology, the best thing you can do is be nice to Muslims.
Yes, I mean, any religion, if they want. Okay, I think there is a lot of conversions to Islam these days around here in UK, in West. Many people are converting. Are they converted because they were going and destroying the Christian principles or their own principles? Like, how dare you say this? How dare you do this? Go back and so on. So there is always a sense of persuasion,
right.
peace.
And actually, I think a reason so many people have converted to Islam is actually quite simple. It is this fear of Muslims. When you're told Muslims are bad, they're this crazy ideology that's trying to take everyone over, and they're bad people, and they're gonna use you and do whatever, right? You're gonna behead you and whatever, right? And cut off your hands. And then you meet Muslims and they're not that way, and they're actually like normal people who have solid community and good food.
Yeah, and sense of hospitality,
right? Then it's this kind of this whiplash.
Yeah.
So not understanding Islam properly, and not understanding the Muslim world properly, is actually causing a lot of people to fall into that, fall into Islam, because the kind of whiplash of being told they're the worst people in the world makes them seem like the best people in the world.
Right.
And the reality is just people.
Yes. At the end of the day, they're people. Evil people, good people.
And people with good and bad things about everyone, right?
Yes. Nobody is perfect. But let me just go on one more point that is important and related to this topic is when Islamophobia started in West. I won't take much of the history in it, but at least, the pivotal point is 9/11. A lot of people refer to that, right? So that incident in 2001, I guess,
Yep.
right? That triggered a lot of that sort of notion toward Islam. But at the same time, I think there are people who did that, and I think they are gone, right? So should we also move on? It is similar that in 1920s, I mean, of course, the KKK, the time of civil right, or I would say not civil rights, uh, civil war in 1800 somewhere, 1860s or somewhere around it, right? The establishment of KKK, and then how they were not able, or they were not ready to see black people as equal to them or having the right to vote. For them, there was certain type of other reality that they cannot fathom. But slowly they disintegrated or went with the time. And then in 1920, they rose again with the propaganda movies. That was the start of that showing white people as the ultimate savior, and showing black people as the ultimate villains. That kind of triggered the whole situation, and then we saw a rise of KKK, right? Eventually it died out because that notion was not the right notion, right? But to say that because KKK had 6 million people, so black people would be afraid that every white person in the United States is some kind of radical towards it, right? So we have to leave certain dark chapters of history behind and look forward and say how we can live side by side or coexist, in a sense, again, not in a sense that making a universalistic religion, but rather have your own views, and I live with my own views, and call it a peaceful coexistence.
So I would say one thing that you need to be able to do in order to do that is to be able to correctly identify who the malevolent actors are and who they are not.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about the history of that in the West right after this word from our sponsor. I just realized we don't have any sponsors. But let's talk about this notion that Muslims have this master plan to take over the West. That would have been true maybe in the 8700s, and it would have definitely been true during the time of the Ottoman Empire.
And just like conquistadors had the idea of taking over all the world by Christian principles, which is, we both know that it's against the very principles. So
kind of.
So okay, that's where we have a disagreement, right? Don't you think that conquistadors were not with this principle that Christianity should be the religion of the whole world?
They for sure do, but they're not driven by Christianity. Is the principle that they use to try and justify that to the people back home, rather than their driving principle. When Hernando Cortez first met the Aztec Emperor Montezuma, he told him, "We have a terrible sickness that can only be cured with vast quantities of gold." What you had was enterprising mercenaries who wanted wealth and power, and were using religion as a pretext to get that. And generally, and again, I'm not a Roman Catholic. I do not believe in Catholicism. I think there's lots of problems with Catholicism. But the reason the conquistadors stopped was because monks that went with the conquistadors on their journeys objected to the things that the conquistadors did and reported them back to Spain and ultimately the Catholic Church. And eventually, these frontier soldiers got a hold of that.
Okay.
Whereas in the early Islamic conquests, the version of Islam that had been constructed there, both in the early Islamic conquest and in the Ottoman Empire, was explicitly a conquest ideology from the beginning. So
power, again, I think power wrapped by religion or religious ideology.
Yeah, for sure, sure.
Anger for power.
Yeah, for sure. But I would argue that in Islam, that starts with the hijra, Whereas in the Christian world, that starts with Charlemagne, who is like, 200 years after the rise of Islam. Now, again, there's a similar species of problem, but there's differences to unpacking those ideologies. Right?
Yes.
Right. So what I'm saying here is you have had at some point a centralized Islamic ideology that does want to conquer the world. But where is that alive today? Who actually believes that and who does not? So if you look at a lot of the Muslim organizations in the West, a lot of them come out of a group known as the Muslim Brotherhood. Not all of them, but a lot of them do.
Mm-hmm.
So the Council of American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Council of Britain, like the original Muslim Students Association. Now that shut down, was replaced with a different organization with the same name. But you have a lot of these organizations that come from the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood was not started with an ideology that wanted to conquer the world.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand it, Hassan al-Banna,
Mm-hmm.
who was operating in the 1900s, died in 1949 or 1948, I think. And what he wanted was to tear down all of the governments of the Muslim countries and build one Muslim state that covered all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he did believe in armed struggle against those things.
Yeah, but confined to the Muslim majorities, areas or countries, not expanding outwards, right? It's just like correction starts from the home within. So first correct yourself before expansion. I think the expansion idea died with how our understanding of humanity developed over time, right? Back then, it was normal for Christians and Muslims equally to take over each other's states. I can prove you from history that that's the case, but again,
Yeah, absolutely.
yes. So
But I think you're giving humanity too much credit here.
humanity is a product of awareness. That's what I call it.
Okay, but it's also a belief system, because most empires think that they're doing it for the good and flourishing of everyone under them,
Mhm.
including the Muslims, including the Ottomans, including the Romans,
Mhm.
including the British, right?
Agree?
The reason we don't like empires right now, at least in the West, like the sort of cultural zeitgeist of borders are borders, leave them alone kind of thing, comes from two places. The first is the Peace of Westphalia, and the second is the Atlantic Charter.
Okay.
So the Peace of Westphalia was when after the Reformation, the religious wars in Europe were ended by basically agreeing that people would live in their national borders and could follow either Protestantism or Catholicism, and they wouldn't receive persecution from this. So that's basically the beginning of European nation states based on explicitly biblical ideas. Sykes-Picot was European empires trying to impose that model of nationhood by force on a Middle East that did not want it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Atlantic Charter was what Winston Churchill signed with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with the explicit understanding that if America was going to enter the war, the peace was going to have to be based on self-determination and nation states, not empires.
Mm-hmm.
Not a German empire, not a Japanese empire, not even a British empire, even though you're our friends.
Yeah,
right?
again, that's the product of awareness that we tested some things and we kept seeing the failures of those things, and then eventually the humans came to realize that this is not the thing that's going to work. Let's change certain things and let's determine in this way. So when I say humanity, I'm not saying that the way humanity is described in like 2,000 years ago at this point, but it's a product. It's a continuously changing thing as more and more awareness of certain matter comes, or if tried and tested methods does not work, then we reconsider our evaluation. So that's what my point.
Yeah, I would just say there has to be a guiding ideology to build from.
Righteous ideology.
Yeah,
right,
exactly. And so I would say that the the ideology behind the Peace of Westphalia and the Atlantic Charter is, so I would say the European colonialism happens after the Peace of Westphalia. And so it's a hypocritical belief in nation states on one hand, nation states for us, but imperial rule for you. And the Atlantic Charter is those principles catching up consistently for the rest of the world, right? Now, we could say that it hasn't consistently caught up for the rest of the world yet in some ways, but it's an ideal we can actually be pushing to, and that's a biblical ideal that God sees the world as nations, and God does not like the kingdoms of men's arrogance, and that people should rule themselves.
Right.
So, but with the Muslim Brotherhood, you've got Hassan al-Banna, who believes all Muslims should be ruled as one. But then you have a guy called Sayyid Qutb. And Sayyid Qutb there's no evidence that he actually met Hassan al-Banna. And he actually joined the Muslim Brotherhood in like 1950. So, and the interesting thing about him is he was like a liberal, educated, westernized guy, and then kind of went on this path. But he believed in a vanguard. So he wanted Muslims to move to the West, destroy Western institutions, and help take it over. And I think what troubles a lot of people in the West is that if you have these Muslim institutions that were started by this group, there's at least a streak of Sayyid Qutb in there. And some American Muslim institutions have been reading his book and hold him as a martyr, and that freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah, I think if we dig that channel, as we were talking off camera, we can draw many parallels to many other institutions and so on and so forth. But for me, I think where Ikhwan stands, Muslim Brotherhood stands across the world, because it's a global thing. I think with the time, their policies changed to more democratic, set forth rule following proceeding. What I'm trying to say here is they believe now, majority of them believe in bringing the change through democracy.
So I actually think that's part of the problem. And the reason I think that is part of the problem is they've always been that way. So if you look at the sort of family tree of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna's immediate successor is a guy called Hassan al-Hudaybi. And he writes a book called Preachers Not Judges, that he wants them to be, peaceful and persuasive. But at the same time, Sayyid Qutb is on the leadership board of the Muslim Brotherhood at this time. So because it's kind of democratic, and because we talked about this sort of Shura model of leadership, where you have lots of different voices in there, that I would say, while Sayyid Qutb is considered a martyr, a shaheed within the Muslim Brotherhood, then his ideas are always going to be somewhat powerful.
Somewhat powerful, yes. But again, there are people who take inspiration from a person like Sayyid Qutb and then lead to something that calls Al-Qaeda.
Right.
Or Taliban's, those people are distinctive. But as I said, Ikhwan is not known by Al-Qaeda. Ikhwan is not known by Taliban. Ikhwan is known by Jamaat al-Islami in Pakistan. Ikhwan is known in Bangladesh. Ikhwan is known in other countries, and they're doing some really good groundwork for people, right? So maybe I'm not saying that I have a soft corner for Ikhwan, but seeing their work on the surface level and seeing their structure in terms of their organization, I found them very democratic in terms of how they select their leaders, how the appointees get promoted, and also the shura, the council. I like the idea of council, because there can be a radical person like Sayyid Qutb in the council, right? But there is a majority who will decide what's going to be implemented, right? And that's true for anywhere in the world. As we talk, there can be evil people anywhere. I consider Sayyid Qutb as an evil person. I don't consider him a righteous martyr, right? And so of many, I think, educated Muslim, I would call it, disagree with Sayyid Qutb's ideas.
So I think if you're taking differentiating between Hassan al-Banna's Muslim Brotherhood and Sayyid Qutb's Muslim Brotherhood, it makes sense to me why all of the like a ton of the Gulf countries especially label the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists, because they do have goals which are directly contradictory to the existence of these Gulf countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the West, Hassan al-Banna's goals aren't inherently a threat, but Sayyid Qutb's goals are.
Right. I think the whole idea is we are bringing people together.
If we're able to differentiate and can find the actual Sayyid Qutbs of the world, like people running Dawa organizations here in this city who are active supporters of Hamas and the Taliban and people like that, and make sure those people are, being properly,
Yes, handled.
and stood up to, right? Whether that's through arguments or whether that's through, watching financial transactions, right? That's very different, right? To be able to find and identify the Sayyid Qutbs of the world, but to be able to differentiate them, that then suddenly makes this a solvable problem where we can help our country without losing our souls in the process. Thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We'll be back next time.